Hi everybody, Rusty Albertson, Director of Communications at St. Mark the Evangelist Catholic Church, joined by Father Tim. Father Tim, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back.
It is great to be back. We're glad to have you. We had Deacon Sam on last time.
I saw.
We had an all-time hit record for views with him.
I know it. You like to, yeah. I haven't been invited back in a long time because you have all the other special guests.
So we have a couple things to talk about. First is we've just finished Pentecost. We're getting ready for the new, the change in liturgical. So tell us a little bit about the calendar for the church and what's going on.
What we are now. So yeah, let's see. 2 weeks ago we had Pentecost Sunday. That was the Red Sunday, where the focus is the Holy Spirit. That is the official end of the Easter season, and we go back into ordinary time. We jumped back into week 8 because weeks 1 through 7 were between Christmas and Lent. So we go to week 8, and now in ordinary time it'll take us all the way to week 33, which is the Feast of Christ the King before Advent. So we'll be in ordinary time until the end of November. So it's going to be green until then. The first 2 Sundays after Pentecost, though, are exciting ones. Right. The first Sunday after Pentecost, which is technically still in ordinary time, but it's always the solemnity of the Most Holy Trinity. Mm-hmm. And the second Sunday after Pentecost, which as we're filming this is in 3 days, that is the solemnity of Corpus Christi, of the body and blood of Christ. So those 2 big feast days come after Easter, almost always in June unless Easter is really early. So this coming weekend, this past weekend we celebrated the Trinity. This coming weekend we will have our Corpus Christi Masses and our Eucharistic processions, which will be exciting, and we'll get to reinvigorate our love of the Eucharist.
And what will that be after or during all the Mass? When does that happen?
The procession is after it's kind of a mini procession because we can't really get permits to shut these streets down and walk around that. So the processions will happen after all the Masses except for the 7 a.m. because we need our musicians to lead the choir as we walk. So after 4:30, 9:30, 11:45, and the 2 p.m. Mass for the Myanmar community, we will end the Mass with Eucharistic adoration as we've done before in Lent and Advent. But instead of silent adoration in here, after I reverence the Eucharist, I will then proceed out. This year we'll go out through Schaefer Hall because the front steps are a mess. But we'll go out through Schaefer Hall, then to the south between the rectory and the church, and over to the front of the Cenacle, if the weather allows, which I looked at the weather and it should allow. Mm-hmm. So the point of that, again, is that we follow the Eucharist where it leads. We bring Christ from the church into the world. And the whole point of processions is it's a public display of our devotion. So all the drivers along 31 will probably be very confused and surprised as they look over and see the whole church marching behind a large golden monstrance as we worship Christ. So Eucharistic processions are awesome. We did not do one last year because the diocese had their own downtown. If any of you went to the big one downtown, they wanted us to focus on that. This year we're doing it here. Next year, close to this time, Corpus Christi will be leading us into the Eucharistic Congress, in which there's about 100,000 or so people coming to Indianapolis for a large Mass, either at Lucas Oil or the track, and then everything else going on downtown.
That's awesome. Now, you've been to Italy and some other countries. How do some other countries celebrate that Feast of Corpus Christi? Is there long processions?
Yeah, so processions are they're very big in really almost every Catholic country except for, not that the United States is all that Catholic a country, but we're not very used to them here, but processions are a big way to mark most feast days in other countries. So say the Feast of St. Mark, if we were a parish in South America or in Spain or Europe or something, typically we would take our statue of St. Mark, put him on a stand, and process around with him through the streets. Again, the idea of the public display of devotion. And so Corpus Christi, we do that with the Eucharist. Awesome. If you go to the Italian Fest this weekend as well, they typically will process with Mary, much like the scene in The Godfather. I think they pinned dollars to her, which is an old Italian custom. So it's just it's a traditional thing in the old countries, as we say. Or in South America, and Father John told me they do processions when they can, often in Myanmar as well.
So you think maybe you've got some pull downtown, we can close off some streets some year, and we can just go all the way?
It'd be hard to close US 31 because it's a national highway, but maybe Edgewood, who knows? Yeah. We could do something.
And I watched on one of I think it was an Oklahoma parish, they had an ad for this weekend with the priest. And I was really kind of interesting to listen to it. He said, I just want to let everybody know we have a special guest coming this week to Mass. And he let it just say, it's Jesus Christ who's going to be with us.
Well, he's there. He's there at every
That's what I
Mass.
thought too, but I thought that was kind of cool that he said that. So come see Jesus
He's
Christ.
going to march around with us,
Yeah,
yeah.
very
So
good.
it's a great experience. I mean, it's one of those things that it's not like a required thing, by the church. The Mass is the more important part, but it's a great way to end Mass, to bring Christ out into the world.
And to
Typically,
focus.
processions are a few miles, by the way. Ours is much shorter, so it should be much easier to do.
We won't get all those steps in.
That's
will we?
right, yeah.
Now we also, since we talked with you last, we have our summer seminarian who we interviewed a little bit ago. Tell us a little bit about Deacon Sam, his role here, and the role of the summer seminarians in general.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we talked about after Pentecost, we have, Trinity and Corpus Christi. Early June is also always the season of ordinations for us in Indianapolis. I was ordained on Pentecost. Deacon Sam will be ordained on Corpus Christi next year. They were ordained on Trinity Sunday this year. It's usually one of those 3 weekends, given where Easter is. So during the summers, the seminarians, as they work their way towards their ordination, will get parish assignments to get them acclimated, to get used to being in parish life. Since I've been here, we've had one every summer. These last 2 years, we've had a transitional deacon. So meaning, unlike Deacon Paul and Deacon Nick, who are permanent deacons, transitional deacons are on their way to transitioning to be a priest. And so when they're in the parish, it's kind of like an intern. When they're a deacon, they can get preaching experience. Anyone who was here last Sunday heard Deacon Sam preach. He did a very good job for Trinity Sunday, not an easy Sunday to preach.
Right.
But if they weren't a deacon, and the deacons as well, they just get a sampling of parish life. They come to meetings, they go to the nursing homes, to the homebound, work with the youth, anywhere we can plug them in. Sometimes they help us carry boxes to move the office from the trailer to the school.
We'll use them however we can.
That's right, however we can use them. Physical labor, teaching things, plugging them in.
Yeah.
I did that. My parish assignments as a seminarian were Our Lady of Perpetual Help in New Albany, St. Malachy. I lived at St. John downtown. So
You
kind
did
of
physical
get that.
labor?
No, but
I was going to say.
none of those places were moving anything. Yeah. I might have actually. Yeah, now that I think about it, I think I painted a barn in New Albany. But so it's their summer vacation, so they get time off as well. But
Sure.
they live in the parish. They get used to parish life, and
I thought it was interesting when in Deacon Sam's talk, not to rehash that, but one of the highlights was I asked him, I said, how do they teach you to do the baptisms? He said, they actually give you a doll.
Yeah,
whatever.
a fake, yeah, and you do it. Yeah.
And his first baptism wasn't just one. but
That's right. He had
twins.
twins. That's right. He had two little boys. I mean, they do. When we learn to hear confession, the professor will sit behind the screen and pretend to be a penitent. It's a mock confession.
Really?
And the whole class sits there and watches you as he'll throw things at you to try and throw you off guard, or to try and so that's the way you learn. Is the theory part is taught as well, but the practicum is really, though, you don't really get used to it till you're in a parish doing it for real.
And I asked him this question, I'm going to ask you, what are some things that they did not prepare you for in seminary for being a parish
Well,
priest?
right now I probably could have used at least 2 years of construction management. We just had a big long meeting this morning on all this stuff with civil engineers. The business side of things, in theory at least, you're an associate first. So like for the business side, you should be kind of shadowing your pastor, watching what he's doing, going to the finance meetings. All that kind of stuff you kind of learn as you go. Also in theory, pastors start off at smaller parishes and then they kind of work their way up. I didn't get that opportunity.
Right.
I got to come right here, which was great.
Sure.
But I was kind of thrown into the fire as far as a big parish with a lot going on in a big school. But you rely on your staff that knows what they're doing and things like that. So seminary is excellent at preparing you for theology and philosophy and all of the sacramental, all of the church stuff. The business side of running a parish, you kind of you learn through an apprenticeship as an associate and then kind of learn on the fly with your staff.
And you hope, and I think you do here, you have a good support staff
Right.
that does a lot of the work for you, and you get all the credit for it.
It's interesting. The only parish body that's mandated by canon law is the Finance Council.
Oh, wow.
Because the Code of Canon Law knows pastor has to have help.
They know.
When it comes to something like that.
You don't want all that on your shoulders.
Exactly, yeah.
So tell us a little bit of a transition. I think we're starting to wrap up construction, if that's the right word.
Yeah. It's starting to look like a building.
Give everybody a little bit of an update on kind of where we're at, if there's been any changes, and I know there's been a lot of questions.
So we're to the point now where what they call substantial completion is in sight, which is kind of like when it's finished, and then you start a punch list where if you find things that need to be adjusted. After that, they'll do some landscaping, finishing, and things like that. But it should be substantially completed near the end of June or beginning of July, somewhere close to the 4th of July, which means that at that point, it's mostly just like the small finishing things. We ran into some snags with our HVAC units coming in later than expected, and then our electrical panels and breakers and things. Those parts were not coming in on time. The electrical guy was like a MacGyver. He figured it all out. We have a lot of temporary solutions, so when the permanent ones come in this fall, even winter, they can replace them over like a long weekend or something and get it all up to the final product. We should be in it by mid-July, is what I'm being told. The ramp and everything will be done by then. Immediately then from there, we're going to be starting on, as we've talked about, the back parking lot expansion and the Schaefer Hall
Renovation?
Renovation, repurposing. All of that will be given, we've talked about doing that thing. We have a lot more to come as far as details and drawings and timelines and things like that. We're still hoping to have all that stuff, the parking lot and the whole new building, everything ready for the start of school in August. Schaefer Hall, I think, will take, he said about 2 months when they start. So if they start that in July, hopefully by September, where we would not. Now, during the time of Schaefer Hall being shut down, I think the biggest thing people will notice is there won't be coffee and donuts after Mass. We'll have to just all go over to Long's together or something, but for about 2 months. But then when that's finished, it'll be very nice. And like I said, drawings and renderings and information will be forthcoming as soon as we get the timeline ironed out. Right now, we got to get this building done and ready to go.
Yeah.
And it's been a struggle.
And I think that people, they watch the videos, see pictures, look on the outside, but I think once they get in and see that itself.
What always amazes me is it looks so much smaller from the outside than it is on the inside. I don't know if it's
cavernous inside.
If it's the perspective that it's kind of, but when you get in there, you're like, how did this fit between those two buildings with so much room in between? It really was a bigger courtord than I remember it being. Yeah.
And I think that even taking down the old convent, the parish offices, all that space in there was pretty grand.
If you think about how providential it is that they just so happened to build the old church and the school so far apart that everything was able to fit in between now to become all one building. Yeah. I'm just surprised it all worked out that well.
Yeah, and what's nice too, just looking at it, I had several people tell me that Bruns-Gutzweiler are doing such a great job with small things.
Yeah.
With the bricks that match the school and the church, with the asphalt shingles that match. When it's completely done, it's going to look like, wow, has that not always been there?
Yeah, exactly. People kept asking me before they put the bricks on, are the pre-K and the offices going to have like the vinyl siding? And I was like, no, it's going to match as best it can, which they did. These bricks from the 90s, those bricks from the 40s, they were able to match all that in a very good way.
Yeah.
So,
even all the way down to the grout.
Right. And those like the concrete sort of like features that are on the corners of the church.
The limestone and so forth.
Yeah, the limestone. Yeah. So I think one of the coolest things is what they were able to save from the old parish offices, and before that, the convent. There was like, if you remember when you walked into that 2-story red brick house building, there was like a Greek-style concrete columns and arch above the door.
Type of thing almost.
Yeah, and they were able to. They told me we're going to try and save it. If it crumbles, then it crumbles. But they were able to save it without anything being damaged and reassemble it in the lobby above a statue nook. Which, as people will read, we're going to put St. Mark in there. So when you walk into the lobby, the first thing you'll see is a very nice statue of St. Mark in a very neat nook. And which leads me also then, in the chapel where St. Mark is now, we have a Sacred Heart statue of Jesus that will go in there. So that'll stay a chapel. It'll go from being our little St. Mark chapel to our Sacred Heart chapel, and then St. Mark will be over there. So it'll be a really neat and very eye-catching entry into the new Parish Life Center.
And I know that June is the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
That's right. Yeah, I did. Yeah,
I saw that on Facebook.
Yes, and we got a new Sacred Heart statue. So
that's
it looks
awesome.
After this weekend, it'll be put in his place. But if you want a sneak peek, he's in there now. So
very nice. Well, we appreciate you coming in, stopping by. I know you're busy heading back down to downtown, the Tribunal, and doing different things, getting your hard hat on for the construction.
We're
Big
almost
shout
there.
out, big shout out to Mrs. Coker and the school staff for a great school year this year.
Yes, this was their construction year. So I told her her first year of principal will only get easier now because the construction she was at every one of those construction meetings with us to coordinate schedules.
What a good year to retire as being a principal.
That's right. That's right. It was. So very good.
Well, we thank you for being here. We hope everybody, you get a chance when you drive by to take a look at the new building. We're really looking forward to the opening. Looking forward to the Archbishop coming in September.
September 30th,
Yep.
to save the date.
75th anniversary.
75th anniversary. Shortly near that time, the pictorial directory should be coming out. We got a lot of
we
exciting
had a great
things
turnout for that,
coming
too,
out.
didn't
We
we?
did. We had well over 100 more families than the last one. So,
awesome.
Which was, I think, 2017.
That's
so,
awesome. Well, we hope everybody has a great week. Enjoy this beautiful weather God's given us. Let's pray for some rain. We need a little bit of rain for the farmers and the grass. And we hope you have a great week. And peace, everybody.
God bless.